The Center for Migration Studies of New York commissioned over 20 papers on different aspects of the refugee protection system by leading scholars for a CMS conference and special collection of the Journal on Migration and Human Security entitled Rethinking the Global Refugee Protection System. In this video, Ninette Kelley, director of the New York office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, discusses her paper, Responding to a Refugee Influx, Lessons from Lebanon.
Well, Lebanon was a country that was completely overtaken by a refugee crisis of a duration that no one anticipated at the initial moment when refugees started to come in. It's a country of 4 million people that's taken in over 1 million Syrian refugees. And to that extent, Lebanon is somewhat atypical because it's one quarter of its population now are refugees. But at the same time, it shares many things that other countries do. It shared a disproportionate burden compared to other countries who are also trying to support refugees because of its proximity to the Syria crisis, which precipitated this large movement. There's many things to be learned from the Lebanon experience that I think can be useful to other situations globally. One is the need for appropriate political forecasting. Many of the contingency plans that were done at the beginning did not anticipate the kind of deterioration that would happen in Syria over the longer term. Agencies also need to consider how to scale up quickly. Some agencies do it better than others, and there's a lot to be learned in terms of what happened in the Lebanon experience that can be useful guides to agencies as they move forward. The importance of engaging not just central government authorities but also local authorities was very important in the Lebanon context. And if you listen to member states around the world, they'll tell you the same thing. It's very important, regardless of the political capacity of a government concern, but they are accountable to their people and we need to engage them in our responses. But most importantly, I think, if I were to pull two things that came out of the Lebanon experience that are instructive for how we move forward, is in the area of innovation, the kinds of technological tools that aid agencies were able to develop in the Lebanon context that greatly facilitated the delivery of assistance, that improved the local capacities, that provided donors with a much better view of needs and gaps, and these can definitely be replicated elsewhere, but also the importance of linking up development interventions with humanitarian at the outset. It was difficult to do, but once the development partners came on stream, we also used initially some humanitarian funding to invest in institutional and community-based support. It delivered large dividends, not nearly enough as what's needed, but it was very important to ensure that if we wanted children to be engaged in public schools, we provided support to local schools and through the national system that would improve education outcomes, not just for refugees, but also for local Lebanese. And the same is true for community projects that we invested in throughout the country, but really that need massive scale up and that can only be done through development engagement, which needs to be marshaled very soon after a crisis and not once it's become protracted. Another lesson that's also, I think, very important, and it's a perennial problem in the humanitarian field, is that we simply don't have predictable funding upon which we can rely. And that translates into massive problems on the ground. Humanitarian funds, often what's pledged at the outset of a year is not delivered. Planning tends to be yearly, not multi-year. And so in January, most humanitarian agencies simply don't know what they'll have to get them to the end of the year. And that can have very disastrous consequences for refugees and also for the communities that are supporting refugees, such that food rations can be cut dramatically. You can see difficulties in preparing for winter, so that when winter storm hits, there's people who are vulnerable. It translates itself into many hidden costs that don't count in terms of, they're not caused by direct conflict, but they're the long-lasting scars of the inability of humanitarian funding to meet the needs of the people of concern.